After I had painted the body and applied the carbon fiber decals, I of course also clear coated it. So I mixed some 2K diamond clear, started on those hard to reach, easy to forget spots first, and then applied a first light coat to the rest of the body. A tiny piece of dust landed in the paint, or at least on the carbon fiber decal, before I really applied some paint, so I quickly removed it and then continued on to the first layer. After applying that first coat, I let it flash off for about 5 minutes, moved on to the second coat in the same manner as the first, not too thick, not too thin, not going for full shine either. I again let that dry for about 5 minutes and then moved on to the final third coat. This was a bit thicker. I'm going for full shine this time, so I'm applying it a lot thicker than I did on those first and second coats, and you can see that as my hand is moving a lot slower and the paint is going on a lot thicker. The third coat is now applied, and I checked it over once more before I set it aside and moved on to the next parts. There were a couple of other parts and pieces that still needed to be painted in order to finish this build off. So I firstly just prepped them just like I did on the interior and chassis parts, then applied a light coat of primer, applied some flat black and some jet black on various parts, and also applied some gunmetal on the wheels. So now that all the parts and pieces have been painted in their main colors and the body had some time to dry up for a couple of days, I could move on to start detailing and finishing it off. So firstly, I painted the inside of the roof and the roof rails, A-pillars and B-pillars, with some flat black just to make it a bit darker and not stand out as much when you put the glass in. You can still see some unpainted areas from the outside. The windshield, rear window, and side windows were all molded in one piece along with the headliner. I also painted that headliner with the same flat black and then moved on to detailing the headlight buckets a bit more by adding some black as well. The chassis and interior could be snapped together, and then I could move on to finishing the inside of the body off in order to all put that together. The glass and rearview mirror are now glued in, so I could start detailing the rest of the body, firstly starting on the front by adding the grills and the headlight buckets. So as usual, I add a black border around the headlight lens just to give it a bit more feel and a better look. And as you can see here, the left one has not been done and the right one has been done. It's a tiny detail but makes a big difference. I don't always do this, but in this case it was absolutely necessary, so I of course did it. Took out the permanent marker, marked it off, and then glued it all in place. Some more vents and grills were put in place, and then I could move on to modifying the taillights. Now these are supposed to go in with 2 pins, and that looks horrible as that's clear and you can see them from the outside. So I just cut those pins off, sanded it smooth, and then painted the back of that bucket with some silver paint to cover it all up and make it look like one big piece. While the silver paint was drying up, I glued on the rear spoiler and also press fit the side mirrors in. There were no chrome parts supplied in the kit for those side mirrors, so I just took out the Molotow chrome paint pen and painted it myself. And at this point I could put the chassis, interior, and body all together. A bit of pushing and pulling, but it all went together pretty much without any hassle or anything out of the ordinary. Just a bit of a pull here and a push there, and it all clicked together very nicely. And with that all done, the rear could be assembled as well. So I glued in the rear splitter, which I supplied with some carbon fiber decals earlier on, which I didn't film as I did the roof, and that was pretty much the same process. The taillights were also glued in place, and then I could glue in the 4 exhaust tips. window wipers were installed, and then it could move on to adding the wheels. Instead of using the kit wheels, I decided to go with some Z28 wheels from Plamos, and as you can see they are a bit too wide, so I modified the hub by cutting it a bit shorter and then sanding it down a bit in order to fit the wheels with the correct offset. So after cutting it down, sanding it down, and doing a couple of test fits, doing some more sanding, it all fit together very nicely. It had the correct offset and it could all be glued together. So I glued the caliper onto the rotor and then glued that assembly into the wheel and then glued that wheel onto the hub, which I shortened in order to get that correct offset, and it all fit together really easily. I could set the ride height as the rear of the rotor is a smooth surface, and so is that hub, which I just cut down and shortened a bit. So if you want it raised or lowered, you can do that really easily with this method. And no, the wheels don't turn after this. These are not toys, these are scale models. If you want to play with them, just buy some die-cast models, as they are a lot better suited for that kind of thing. These plastic models break way too easily, and you put so much time into it that it's kind of not the thing you want to see done with them afterwards. So if you want to play with them, just get some die-cast models. That's a lot more fun and a lot more durable. So some of the final details added were some indicators or reflectors on the rear bumpers and also on the front. I just applied some bare metal foil, then cut it to shape, added some marker with a red permanent marker and removed the excess material. Also applied some decals on the wheels and on the calipers, and this build is finished. Now, it was not the easiest kit to build, as most of the parts did not really fit together. They were a tight fit and needed a bit more room, so some of the holes needed to be drilled a bit bigger in order to fit the pegs and stuff like that. But overall, no major issues. It is a pretty good kit for an AMT after all. Price-wise, it's really nice, and it's a really good representation of the actual car. Now, I hope you like this build. I really love the way that it came out, the stance, the style, it all looks really good to my eye. So I will see you on the next one.